So, what happens when a simple timeline of documented facts goes head-to-head with an official government statement? What happens when those two things are in complete opposition? Well, it all starts with just one, stunning claim made on national television.
So that was Pam Bondi. And at the time of this hearing, she wasn't just some commentator, she was the U.S. Attorney General, the top law enforcement official in the entire country. And she goes on TV and makes this incredibly specific claim. The Epstein client list is real, and it's literally sitting on her desk. For a lot of people, this felt like, finally, this is the breakthrough we've been waiting for.
And then, just like that, the whole story flips. A quiet, official memo comes out from her own department, the Department of Justice, basically saying that the list she described, well, it just doesn't exist. Not on her desk, not anywhere. So you're left with this unavoidable question. One statement, one memo. One of them is flat out wrong.
Now, this massive contradiction, right out in the open, is what sets the stage for a pretty dramatic showdown. Because you know how it is, the news cycle moves on. But one person decided this was just too big of a discrepancy to let slide.
I mean, think about it. This wasn't some slip of the tongue. This was the Attorney General describing a specific physical thing in a specific place, and the contradiction was just left hanging there, totally unresolved, until one congressman decided to use his 5 minutes in a hearing not to give a big speech, but to just demand a simple answer.
Okay, so picture this. It's a congressional hearing. The man asking the questions is Florida Congressman Jared Moskowitz. And the clock is ticking. He's only got 5 minutes to try and cut through all the noise and get to the facts. And what he does with that little bit of time is just methodical, it's surprising, and as you'll see, it's incredibly effective.
Now here's what makes this so interesting. Moskowitz wasn't some political enemy just looking to score points. He actually starts his 5 minutes by sincerely thanking Bondi. See, after the horrible shooting at his own high school, it was her office that helped him pass a huge school safety bill. And when a man with rifles and a hateful manifesto targeted him and his family, her department prosecuted the guy. So this wasn't just some partisan attack, this was personal, and it came from a place of shared history. So after thanking her, he says, however. And what came next wasn't an argument, it wasn't an accusation, it was just a timeline. A calm, steady reading of documented facts, each one just building on the one before it. Moskowitz just laid out a pattern, step by step. First, Republicans on a key committee voted against releasing the very files they had been publicly demanding. Next, the Speaker sends Congress home right when a petition to force a vote was picking up steam. And during that break, the Deputy AG, who by the way used to be a lawyer for Donald Trump, has a secret 2-day-long interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. A few days later, Maxwell gets quietly moved to a minimum security prison. Then, a whole series of damaging leaks that had been going to the Wall Street Journal just stops. And finally, when Congress comes back and actually forces the vote, members were reportedly pulled into the Situation Room and pressured to back down.
So, here's the bottom line. The administration didn't just willingly release these files. It took a rare, veto-proof, bipartisan supermajority in Congress to legally force them out. We're talking every single member of the House but one, and the entire Senate. And the White House's reaction to that? They called this act of congressional oversight a hostile act.
So all of that effort, all of that pushback to slow down the release, it naturally leads to a really big question. What in the world was in those files? Well, as it turns out, the contents blew several official stories right out of the water.
Let's start with FBI Director Cash Patel. He testified, under oath, that Epstein was a lone predator. And he said there was no credible evidence that Epstein trafficked girls to anyone but himself. But the files? They showed a global machine, a trafficking operation with connections stretching from Poland to Russia. And, maybe the most chilling part, the document showed Epstein used a summer camp as a hunting ground, grooming girls at a picnic table. That is a whole universe away from a lone predator.
But Director Patel wasn't done. He made another very specific claim while he was under oath. He told the Senate that Donald Trump's name appears in the Epstein files fewer than 100 times. A nice, clear, specific number.
The reality? In the files that were actually released, his name appears thousands of times. It's spread out across more than 5,000 separate documents. We're not talking about a small mistake or a slight miscalculation here. This is a completely different reality.
And just to give you a sense of that number, Moskowitz used these two unforgettable comparisons. Trump's name is in the Epstein files more times than the word God is in the entire Bible, and more times than the name Harry Potter appears in all 7 Harry Potter books. Now look, having a name in a file doesn't prove guilt, of course not. But what it does prove is that the sworn testimony was dramatically, verifiably, and just wildly wrong.
Okay, next up, let's talk about the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnik. In an interview, he makes this really bold statement calling Epstein the greatest blackmailer of all time and saying that everything he did was on video.
And that just brings up a really simple, logical question, right? Lutnik's own story is that he only went to Epstein's house one time, back in 2008, felt weird about it, and then left and never came back. So how would he possibly know all the specific details of a complex blackmail operation?
I mean, the picture he painted was crystal clear. He said he and his wife saw a massage table in the living room, got a really bad vibe, and made a firm decision right then and there to cut all ties. A very neat and tidy story.
Yeah, but the files, they tell a very different story. The documents actually place Howard Lutnik and his family on Epstein's private island in 2012. That's a full 4 years after he claims he walked away for good. So once again, the official story just gets completely contradicted by the documented record. So you've got this mountain of evidence, this documented timeline of contradictions and apparent obstruction, all laid out right in front of her. How did Attorney General Bondi respond? Well, her answer is maybe just as revealing as the facts themselves.
It was like watching the art of deflection in real time. She sat there and heard 5 straight minutes of verifiable facts, and then she just ignored every single one of them. The list, the memo, Maxwell's prison transfer, the sworn testimony, the island trip, she didn't touch any of it. Instead, her response was to criticize Congressman Moskowitz for holding up a Trump-branded Bible as a prop. It was a complete and total pivot.
And that moment just perfectly captures the dynamic in that room. On one side, you had a congressman who came armed with a timeline of public records. And on the other side, you had the Attorney General who showed up prepared, not with answers, but with a binder full of personal opposition research on the very people who were questioning her. One came with facts, the other came ready for a fight.
And you know, even after this massive document release, there are still so many crucial questions. The names of 6 known co-conspirators, still blacked out, still redacted. Ghislaine Maxwell herself claims that other associates cut secret deals, and she's even offered to name them. And the president's own story about banning Epstein from his club is now directly contradicted by the club manager's account in these very files. It's clear the full story is far from over.
And that really brings us back to the core idea here. A timeline is not a theory. It's not an argument you can debate. It's just a sequence of documented, verifiable events. It's a record of what happened, laid out in order. It's supposed to be a tool to find some clarity in the middle of all the chaos.
From the list that wasn't actually there, to the sworn testimony that was off by thousands, to the cabinet secretary who was on an island he swore he'd never go back to, a really clear pattern starts to emerge. Over and over again, official stories seem to crumble when they're held up against documented facts. And that leaves you with one final, pretty important question. At what point does a pattern like that stop being a coincidence and start looking like something else?